Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Alice, and today's video is going to be about this full moon partial lunar eclipse at 5 degrees and 9 minutes of Taurus. So you want to look at your own chart and see what house this is happening in, because this is the aspect of life where you're having a completion. And of course, we know that completions mean beginnings as well. And this is a pretty special lunar eclipse because it is our last eclipse in the Taurus and Scorpio axes in consciousness, or so in our charts, until May of 2031. And in May of 2031, we'll actually have a North Node in Scorpio and South Node in Taurus, rather than this time that we've traversed the Taurus and Scorpio axes in consciousness with a North Node in Taurus and a South Node in Scorpio. So that cycle began for us January 19th of 2022, and it completed with the nodes being in Taurus and Scorpio on July 18th of 2023. So now we have the nodes of the moon in Aries and Libra, but we're still experiencing this last eclipse in the Taurus and Scorpio axes in consciousness. Now we know with a full moon, this means that the sun and the moon are in an opposition. So the moon is in Taurus opposing the Scorpio sun. Scorpio sun being at 5 degrees, 9 minutes of Scorpio. And this particular chart for this full moon is interesting because there's a lot of oppositions. And oppositions are a Libran aspect in the psyche. This means that it often happens in relationship to something in the outside world, what we see as the outside world. So often the dynamics when we have oppositions will come to us from some sort of reflection that we're getting, whether it's people, places, things, circumstances, situations that are really giving us the opportunity to look at, in this case, with the sun and moon, the level of congruency with what is being reflected back to us in our internal world, the moon. And the moon's in Taurus. And so this is about our sense of self-trust, our sense of self-value, our capacity to really love ourselves and trust our own senses, trusting the body consciousness, knowing that the body doesn't lie. It always is telling the truth of what we're feeling. And so this is really about really trusting our own personal senses, our own personal values in discerning what is good for us personally, and then how we share that with others. And so this full moon is really special because it is the completion of the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio. And the nodes of the moon, when we come up to May of 2031, where we're going to experience the nodes and the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio again, that time we'll have a North Node in Scorpio and a South Node in Taurus. So whatever we've been seeding from January 19th of 2022 to July 18th of 2023, as we've been traversing this Taurus-Scorpio axis in our own consciousness, in our own charts, individually, collectively, we've been seeding a cycle that then will have some element of a fruition as we traverse the nodes beginning in May of 2031. So this is why looking at the eclipses is really important, because we are seeding more long-term cycles individually and collectively. So now, beginning July 18th of 2023, we have the nodes in Aries and Libra. We've already experienced Aries and Libra eclipses beginning in the spring of 2023. And so we've this is how the eclipses work. They weave in and out. And so now we're really looking at the nodal structure of Aries and Libra. Interestingly, this means that we're still working with the planetary rulers of the nodes, but in a different form. So when the nodes were in Taurus and Scorpio, the North Node being Taurus was ruled by Venus. And this is the yin form of Venus. And so this is about the heart chakra. It's about our own personal needs internally that direct us on our own evolutionary path and our own evolutionary momentum. And we know this because Taurus sits across from Scorpio in the sky in our own charts. And so they work together. Whenever we have a polarity like that, we're working with these archetypes together. They're kind of like reflections of the same thing, really. So this is where, when we have the nodal structure in an axis in consciousness, we get to recognize where we may be incongruent with these two aspects of our consciousness, and yet they're really looking at the same consciousness from a different angle. They work together, right? And so Scorpio is all about how we really cultivate our own empowerment and our own momentum, as it's ruled by Mars and Pluto, which is the soul in evolutionary astrology. This is the reason why we even incarnate, or we find ourselves in 3D reality, is because on a soul level, we've chosen to explore specific themes of our own consciousness. And so this is what Scorpio really represents. The reason we incarnate, the themes of being empowered within our own incarnation and our own evolutionary development, our own psychological development, our own psyche, diving deep into the psyche, diving deep into what it is that we value, what it is that resources us personally, which may be very different than what resources another person or other beings, because we have our own unique self-actualization process. We have our own unique reasons for having body consciousness and exploring 3D dimensions, right? So this is really exploring this aspect of our consciousness, being a yin consciousness. And what does yin mean? But it's energy moving inward. It's consciousness moving inward. So this is internal. So we know that our power is actually developed from within, because Scorpio, being ruled by Pluto and Mars, is yin. So this means our power and empowerment is not seated in the outside world. It's actually seated in the internal world, in our own heart, in our own heart chakra, Venus and Taurus. I always think of Taurus as not only Taurus, the sign or the archetype, Taurus, but it's also our vibration. It's our Taurus energy, Taurus. This is our own personal vibration, and how we magnetize things to us based on the cultivation of self-love, our own real deep dive in our own psychological motivations, what it is, how we've actually determined what it is that we really need based on trusting ourselves and our own self-reliance, how much we're able to really tap into our own soul resources, our own treasure chest, the gold within us that is naturally inherent in every being. And yet, in order to really bring this out into the world, into Yang consciousness, Mars, Aries, we must actually dive deep into our own psychological motivations and really determine how much we've cultivated trusting our own soul, trusting our own evolutionary path, and really trusting ourselves, trusting that what we desire is actually desiring us as well. Knowing that we wouldn't even desire it, it wouldn't even occur in our consciousness, and it wouldn't even be something that we loved if it wasn't already within our Taurus field. So often when we are desiring something, it's because we know, so maybe we're attracted to something, right? We know that this is actually a clue to our own evolutionary momentum. It's a clue towards our next steps in our evolutionary path, even though it may actually unfold in a very different way than we initially anticipate. It's part of guiding us. It's our own heart guiding us to our next steps, to actually all that we could ever desire. And all that we could ever desire is actually very key and tied into our personal evolutionary path. This is why people have different values. This is why people have different belief systems, because they actually support our own evolutionary path, our own empowerment, as well as our capacity to empower others as well. And Scorpio is where we develop this true power coming from the inside that then expresses outward and naturally empowering others. And I say naturally because our Taurus and Scorpio axis in consciousness is about cultivating our natural core essence, who we are, beyond anyone else, beyond the society we find ourselves in, beyond the communities we find ourselves in, beyond the groups we find ourselves in. This is about the individuation process and the unique brilliance that we each bring into the world. And this is shown through the fixed grand cross, which is Taurus, Scorpio, and Leo and Aquarius. So we've been cultivating that. We've been looking at these ways in which we may have identified with our own self-value up to now, and where it is that we've learned to actually expand our capacity for self-love, self-trust, and self-reliance, and maybe even recognized where we may have lost touch with intimacy with ourselves, our own power or disempowerment, where we have gotten the opportunity to actually release things that are really in the way of our natural core essence, really are not part of our value systems now, where we may have engaged in intimate bonds that are really not in support of our personal value, that are not resourcing us in what it is that we value, in our own evolutionary momentum, in our own hearts. What is it expanding our heart? Because if it's not expanding our heart, it's not really for us. And so we could have been traversing intimate bonds, our capacity to be intimate with ourselves and our own psyche, our own psychological process. And, remember that if we're not cultivating power from within, this is where we can tend to then seek to control things in the outside world, which just shows us if we're actually trying, or others are trying to control us, or we're trying to control others or things in the outside world, then we may actually be noticing that we've actually lost touch with our true power. We don't really trust our true power because we don't need to manipulate anything in the outside world when we know our power is from within, and that the outside world is really just reflecting how well we're cultivating our own power, where it is we may need to pivot into new directions in order to really move forward in our own empowerment and bringing forth the empowerment to others that are actually right for us. And this really leads me into the Aries and Libra nodes, because Aries and Libra is a yang form of Mars and Venus, whereas with Taurus and Scorpio, we've been looking at our yin form of Mars and Venus, how we really internally relate to our own masculine Mars and our own feminine Venus. Now, once we are looking at Aries and Libra, this is Yang. So this is really giving us the opportunity to look at how well we've cultivated our own power, how well we've cultivated our own masculine capacity to really move, create movement and momentum in our own lives based on delving deep into our own psychological development, our own psyche, and looking at what directions are really empowering for us and what is disempowering for us. When we look at Aries and Libra, this is, well, okay, we're going to magnetize things to us based on how well we've cultivated our self-trust, based on how well we actually know ourselves, how much we've actually done the deep dive into our own psyche and our own motivations, how well we've actually really cultivated true power, or are we actually desiring to control the relationships that we find ourselves in, to manipulate the relationships that we find ourselves in, where we create imbalance in a relationship, where there is not a really capacity to regenerate energy in relationships, where it may be one-sided or just not healthy in actually assisting us to evolve in the outside world as well, where the outside world is reflecting what it is that we love and value, and our own sense of self-respect, self-reliance, self-value, and what it is we love in the world. So this eclipse has a lot of oppositions in it, and so I want to talk about that, because oppositions are very much a Libran aspect in consciousness. Libra is where we experience an opposition. This is me and you, right? You and me, your needs and my needs and your needs. And are they really, are both people's needs able to be met in a relationship? Because all relationships are really meant to support evolutionary development. We are attracted to people because there's a part of us that knows that they have some clues, some maybe capabilities, some strengths, or just pieces of information that are going to be helpful along our own evolutionary path to cultivate our own personal evolutionary path. So with the Aries Libra nodes and with all of these eclipses coming in Aries and Libra, this is going to assist us to really look at our relationships, look at the reflections, and really look at, is this really congruent with what it is that is supporting me, making me feel excited and alive? And it doesn't mean, you know, we could come into conflict with people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship needs to end. It could just mean that there are adjustments to be made in how we're really internalizing those reflections, and then maybe how we're relating, and really looking at our relationships are giving us the opportunity to see how we actually relate to ourselves and our own power. And remember that, you know, Scorpio ruled by Mars, well, Aries is ruled by Mars as well. It's the yang form of Mars. So as we've been looking at our own relationship to our own power with a Scorpio South Node, where we may have been actually cleansing these ways that we may have been engaging intimately with people, places, things that actually are not resourcing us, and we may not be able or have the capacity to resource them, where we may realize that it's best for both parties to move in different directions. We can see where we could have been then really fueling ourselves as well as supporting others to create their own new sense of becoming and new identity, which is indicated with a North Node in Aries. And if we've been engaging in power dynamics that is unhealthy, imbalanced, or that is trying to control from out there rather than internally, then we can actually be setting ourselves up to create an identity that is going to experience new chapters, Aries, of really all of the shadow parts of Aries, which is overly self-identified, right? Creating identity that is the dark sides of being selfish, where we will engage in fighting and, war, where we are not the peaceful warrior, but we're actually having power struggles with others because we're not allowing others to be who they are. And as much as we don't allow others to be who they are in their own learning process, because we're all in a learning process, then we're also that's going to naturally fall back onto us, and where we don't allow ourselves to be who we are, because this is how we're engaging our Mars energy, right? Now, something that I have come across in my own processes, in my own contemplating Venus, is that Venus is about allowing. Venus is about allowing ourselves to receive. And this is where we do this by allowing others to receive as well, meaning that allowing others their own life force energy, their own evolutionary momentum, and their own learning process. This is why different people are going to have different values. And we need to, I think, allow that so that we can allow ourselves our own process as well. The quickest, fastest route to our own receiving that which we desire. And that's a learning process. It's an expanding in consciousness, just as it is for others. And so we don't need to control other people's processes. We only control within ourselves our own process. And so this can be part of the dynamic with Aries and Libra, because we can be looking at how am I actually engaging my Mars energy in the outside world, and how that really shapes my own identity. It shapes the new chapters that I'm beginning of my own identity, and what I identify with, the types of values I identify with, the types of relationships that then I will naturally attract to me based on how I'm applying my Mars consciousness, how I'm applying my masculine energy. And remember that Venus is all about self-trust. Why is it about self-trust? Because Venus knows, she trusts her own masculine, Mars, Aries. She trusts her own actions. And this is why Mars and Aries can be about being the peaceful warrior, about actually being honorable in how we utilize our own masculine energy, where we actually honor our own life force energy and also honor others as well, even when they're incompatible, meaning that we might find we're incompatible with specific ideas, people, places, things, but we can actually utilize that information as clarifying our own values in our own actions as well, how we desire to act and be in the world. So Venus is trusting her masculine, Mars. And remember, Chiron is in Aries. And so this is about the wounds to the masculine. And I really do feel that a lot of the wound of the masculine is actually trying to control things out there rather than modeling the world by which we desire to be in. And so this is about taking back our own power, not leaking our power, trying to manipulate and control everything out there, but actually modeling the quality of consciousness we desire to be. Because at the end of the day, it's our own evolutionary journey, and it's about being that which we desire to see in the world, so that it creates a model for that, where others can be inspired and do the same in their own way, and really be truly empowered to find their own way of finding their true power. But if we're trying to manipulate and control everything out there, it only continues that cycle. This is then just teaching people to do the same, right? So we do our best and we notice the reflections we're getting so that we can actually pivot in the new ways in which we desire to really embrace our own Mars and masculine nature, so that we can actually trust ourselves, knowing that our actions are absolutely going to impact our TORUS, our Taurus field, our magnetic vibration, and we're going to magnetize things based on how well we've been actually creating these little energetic signatures in our own Taurus field with our Mars energy. Okay, so going to this full moon lunar eclipse, this is wrapping up this learning. And I'm going to pull up the chart, so give me a minute. So the sun and moon are in an opposition, as with all full moons. 5 degrees 9 minutes, Taurus and Scorpio, axes and consciousness, yin. And interestingly, we have Mars in a new phase conjunction, within a conjunction to not only the sun, but also, we have Mercury in what's called a balsamic or completing conjunction with Mars. So we have the sun at 5 degrees 9 minutes of Scorpio, and Mercury at 10 degrees, Scorpio, and Mars at 11 degrees. Now, Mars is in a waxing, almost exact. No, excuse me. We have Mars just past a exact opposition to Jupiter. So Jupiter is at 11 degrees 14 minutes retrograde in Taurus, and Mars is 11 degrees 23 minutes to Jupiter. So this is a waning opposition, but it's pretty close to being exact. So the tension is there. And this is really about how well we've been acting upon our own personal beliefs. What beliefs actually support our values? Looking at, okay, how well have we actually maybe pivoted from old belief structures that are no longer supporting what we value now? Belief structures that we may have taken on in osmosis from the collective unconscious, maybe from specific spiritual understandings or religions. Could have been from our family line, could have been the culture that we actually grew up in or found ourselves in, could have been communities we found ourselves in, could have been societies that we've been in, that we actually picked up belief systems that may have worked for us at one time, even if it's just for our own learning process, recognizing that it does not support us personally, that it may support others, it may still support others, but it doesn't support and is not up to date to our own self-love, self-value, self-trust, and our own needs for our own evolutionary momentum. Remembering that our belief systems and belief structures are meant to support our personal evolutionary momentum and empowerment. We're all meant to be empowered, but the beliefs that support that are going to be different depending on our own personal purpose in our lives. What aspect of consciousness that we're actually navigating in our own life. We all come in with specific themes that we're personally exploring. So some things that are important to us and support us, it's going to be different for others because they have different themes and different explorations. And this is what creates a holistic society, holistic culture, holistic collective. So this is why we need to value ourselves, because we need to recognize that what works for us may not work for others. What works for others may not work for us. So this is why we have to deeply investigate our own psyche and what is actually helpful to us personally, supporting us personally, resourcing us personally. So with a Mars opposition to Jupiter, this could be, it's kind of like a full moon with Mars and Jupiter. It's like, all right, well, how well have I been doing since the new moon in regards to acting on my own behalf, acting on my own beliefs, acting on new beliefs that support my sense of value, my own heart, and what I actually really relate to from the inside out, right? And so this opposition is really important. And, Mercury is the faster moving planet than Mars. So Mercury is going to, move beyond that Mars. And so it's coming into completions around our thoughts, Mercury. Mercury and Jupiter have a very important relationship to each other. Mercury rules Gemini, which is a yang form of Mercury. Mercury rules Virgo, the yin form of Mercury. Whereas Gemini goes out there and learns from all different opposing points of view, all different types of information. And then Virgo Mercury is like, all right, well, I'm going to discern what information is actually supportive of my own evolutionary path and the service that I'm meant to provide as my own expression of the divine, my own contribution to the collective unconscious, my own cultivation of the quality of consciousness that I'm here to bring as a service in the world. And so Jupiter rules Pisces. And so that's the relationship between Mercury and Jupiter. But Jupiter also rules Sagittarius, the yang form of Jupiter, right? So Jupiter ruling Pisces is the yin form. So this is what beliefs have I osmosed from the collective unconscious that actually are serving me, and then which ones are not, right? And when I've gone out there and learned different maybe belief systems, cultures, ideas, what are serving me and which ones are not. So Mercury coming into an opposition to Jupiter retrograde is like, okay, what thoughts am I having? Really centered around my own power, empowerment, and how I share that with others in the world. And then am I, being persuaded by others to believe things that are really more right for them than they are me, or vice versa? How well am I actually really honoring my self-trust when I know that a specific belief isn't good for me, or a specific idea isn't good for me, a specific thought isn't good for me, right? But maybe good for others, or maybe isn't good for others. How am I communicating that as well? Because Mercury is about communication. So Mercury is thoughts, perceptions, ideas, information, communication, commerce, how we distribute information, how we distribute goods, because even goods are just information at the end of the day, right? Things that assist us to grow and expand our consciousness. And really, Jupiter's all about expanding consciousness. So what beliefs are assisting you to expand your consciousness? This is important. Mercury is in a waxing opposition to that Jupiter retrograde. So this is about, how do I need to utilize this Virgo and Mercury discernment around ideas, thoughts, perceptions, beliefs, how we're distributing information, how we're receiving and perceiving information. Is it really honoring my self-trust, self-value, self-worth, and self-reliance? Am I really being self-reliant in regards to my own ideas, my own beliefs, and my own thoughts that support that? Recognizing if we're having thoughts that are not assisting us to be empowered, we can understand that we have a belief that we're holding on to unconsciously that actually may not be in support of us and actually isn't true for us. It's basically a lie we're telling ourselves. And so this is where we need to be honest with ourselves as well as with others. And of course, this relates to intimate bonds as well. So what is valuable to you now? What supports what's valuable to you now? What relationships are valuable to you now? It doesn't mean that if a relationship isn't really actually resourcing you, it doesn't mean that relationship is inherently bad. It's just that it may be outgrown. right? So we can be seeing that with the nodes in Aries and Libra. Now, the ruler of the full moon lunar eclipse is Venus, and Venus was the ruler of the new moon solar eclipse that we just experienced on October 14th. So we've got Venus as the ruler first in a Yang, the Yang South Node eclipse in Libra. Now we have Venus as the ruler Yen eclipse in Taurus. Venus is at 18 degrees of Virgo. And Venus was actually at 5 degrees of Virgo in the new moon solar eclipse. And so interesting that Venus was actually in a trine at the new moon solar eclipse on October 14th to the full moon that we're experiencing on October 28th. That is in Taurus. Now, one thing I just realized, I didn't even tell you what the date is for this eclipse. The date is October 28th, and it's occurring at 4:24 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can translate that to wherever you are in the world, okay? Now, interesting that now Venus has moved on since that new moon solar eclipse, is now at 18 degrees, and it's in a waxing opposition to Neptune in Pisces, which is also retrograde. It's waxing. We've got Venus at 1849 and we've got Neptune at 2517. So after this full moon eclipse, Venus will continue to move on and then actually it's applying to the opposition. So it's building that tension. And this is really beneficial because this can be showing where we need to apply our Virgoan discernment in what is valuable to us in regards to what we've asked most from the collective unconscious. What is actually really coming to dissolve in our own belief systems, in what we see as our own spiritual path, and by the way, everything is spiritual. So however you translate that, what maybe spiritual traditions you're interested in, maybe spiritual disciplines, maybe just your relationship to yourself, knowing that that is a direct correlation to your relationship to source, the relationship to the divine, relationship to God, goddess, source energy, however you name that. And so this can be some things that are dissolving in what you're cultivating in your own garden of consciousness as a service to the collective unconscious, as a service to the collective consciousness, which is naturally a service to your own evolutionary momentum. So that's another opposition, which means too that this could be coming from how we're relating to anything and everything in the outside world. Could be relating to how we're viewing the collective and what's going on in the collective and how we relate to that, how we don't relate to that. And, what we actually see as valuable in that and what is not valuable in that for us. Our own storylines, our own writing of our own story from here on out. Because remember that Pluto will move into Aquarius, and the next set of eclipses, Pluto's going to be in Aquarius. This is all about the new world, right? And so we're finishing up, we're wrapping up the old story we've been living. We're actually letting those stories be complete so that we can actually write the new story of our lives. And this is where our power is. And this is why we want to have and cultivate our self-trust in writing our own story and the ideas that are going to support that, the values that are going to support that, the beliefs that support that. So Pluto is still within square to the nose. It's still in Capricorn, 27:58. So 27 degrees, 58 minutes. So that is this evolutionary pressure, which I think, I'm a little biased because I have Pluto square the nose in my own chart. But as much as people often teach that that's so intense and it's almost, I find people find it to be a little daunting, and understandably so, but it's actually super empowering. It puts the pressure, but if you've been following me, pressure, it's all about how we relate to pressure. Pressure is such an awesome opportunity to harness that pressure to catapult you into the new, to catapult you into your power, to really deeply psychologically investigate what really is your power. What is it that's empowering you? And trusting yourself in that. Trusting yourself to move in directions that make you feel that power, make you feel alive in a positive way, in a way that's productive. And recognizing what's debilitating your power, what's debilitating your energy. What isn't giving you energy? That's a big indicator that it's draining your energy. Maybe it's an idea about it. Maybe it's a belief. And so that's where we get the opportunity to look at, am I just thinking these things that are actually debilitating me? Or is this just actually, ideas that are keeping me in situations, people, places, things, relationships that are not serving me? We can be really letting go of collective conditioning right now with Pluto and Capricorn. This is what Pluto, especially at the end of the degrees of Capricorn, is about, is deconditioning from ideas, thoughts, perceptions, beliefs, Saturn and Pisces, retrograde, that we osmose from the collective unconscious, that actually is not supportive of the individual and the creative self-actualization of the individual. This is where we take our power back. And we want to be doing this as we wrap up Pluto's navigation of Capricorn. Because once Pluto goes into a yang sign, Aquarius, this is really where the whole old world is crumbling and the new world is actually beginning. And this is where you really want to be positioning yourself in all aspects of your life. What's resourcing you? What's not resourcing you? What's draining you of your resources? And what is actually appreciating your resources? Are you appreciating yourself? Or is anything and everything in the outside world, is it appreciating you? Because if it's not appreciating you, it's depreciating you. It's depreciating your value. It's chipping away at your sense of self-value and self-worth, self-esteem. So if we're not having good self-esteem, something in our world we've been investing in is not investing in us. Let it go. This full moon will assist us to do that, okay? So notice these things so that you can be fully empowered in the new world. Now, remember that this moon is going to continue on from the full moon eclipse and move over that Jupiter retrograde, assisting us to really look at our values, yes, but our beliefs. And is it supporting our self-value? Are our relationships supporting our self-value? And then the moon will move over Uranus. We'll probably have an integration point then. We'll get these aha moments. We'll integrate the information we've been getting, going, oh, yeah, if this is assisting me to integrate more of my natural core self, this is good. If this is something that's actually creating a disintegration, a segregation, a chipping away of my own self-value, that's trauma. Let that go. Let go of the people, places, things, situations that are chipping away at your own integrative process of your power and your self-value, self-trust, self-worth, and resources. We all know that the financial system is changing behind the scenes. So remember that. This is the last Taurus Scorpio eclipse. Remember, it squares Aquarius and Leo. So the financial system is being overhauled from the inside out. Once Pluto goes into Aquarius, this is going to be exposing what's been happening behind the scenes. Make sure you're investing in things that are assisting you to position yourself in the best way you can, whether it's gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, even learning about the financial system. If you haven't been learning about the financial system, do everything you can now to learn so that you can position yourself and resource yourself and be self-reliant as much as possible. It doesn't mean that we won't be interdependent with others, but we don't want to be a heavy weight, right? We don't want to have to rely on others. It's just sets us up for manipulation by others, right? So we want to be as self-reliant as we can. So what else? I wrote down a few notes here. I want to make sure we're trusting in the right things, the things that support us. Make sure that we trust our own power. And again, remember, if we're trying to manipulate things out there, if we're trying to control other people, manipulate other people, or they are doing this to us, we can know that this is a trust and lack of power. So if we're noticing where we're trying to manipulate things rather than utilize information to actually pivot in new directions, if necessary, to support ourselves, then we know we're trusting in our lack of power. We're trusting in lack. We're not believing in our own power. Why is that? What beliefs, what ideas have we bought into that actually have us believing unconsciously that we're not powerful enough within ourselves? So if we're trying to control other people, this shows we're not trusting in our own power, and we're trusting in lack. We're not trusting ourselves, knowing that we're going to receive back based on how we're actually really acting on our own behalf and our own needs and our own resources and our own selves as a resource, because we are here to be a resource to others as well. And we're naturally a resource when we're actually in our natural core essence and we're actually acting on that which we love. This is our big indicator. What we love, what we're passionate about is what we're here to bring, how we resource other people, and how we are a resource for other people. So paying attention to those things are important. And so I did talk about Venus waxing opposition Neptune. I wanted to say Mercury and Mars are invisible in the sky right now, so we can be seeing that there's actions going on behind the scenes we may not be aware of. There's communications happening that may have an agenda, a motivation behind it that we're not aware of. But if we're really paying attention, if we're actually reading between the lines, we're going to be able to understand what's happening behind the scenes, where others may be manipulating information to manipulate others, where people may be communicating to manipulate, withholding information to manipulate. And so paying attention to those things is really important, because Mars, being the ruler of the North Node, and the fact that it's invisible in the sky, this could be some things going on behind the scenes. And gossip, communications going on behind the scenes, not only in the on the world stage, not only in regards to the financial system, politics, but also politics within our own communities, politics within our own relationships, communications to actually manipulate people to think things, to believe things. This is very important. And we know that if that's happening, these people are very disempowered. They're not acting on behalf of their own true power. So they don't believe in their own power. And therefore, they're not really in alignment with true power, right? So just recognize that there may be secrets going on. There may be agendas going on behind the scenes on why people are communicating things, why they're not communicating things. So be aware. And really, I just want to bring also that, Mars, Mercury, the Sun will eventually in Scorpio season move towards Uranus and eventually oppose Uranus. So this is about integrating our own ideas, really being the embodiment of our own ideas and our own beliefs, right? And it is also about our actions really being congruent with our own ideas, our own beliefs, and our own power, and our own empowerment, our own self-reliance. So when the Sun opposes Uranus, this will show, are we really self-actualizing our own ideas, our own empowerment? Are we really integrating our own values? Or are we still acting upon other people's values, other people's ideas, other people's beliefs? that really are not congruent with our own, that are not empowering us. So, you know, just be aware of that. I also just a little supplemental information is Juno is in Virgo, really close to where Venus was at the new moon solar eclipse on October 14th. It's at like 4 degrees and some minutes, and you know that was at 5 degrees, so Venus was at 5. Juno is in Virgo, and it's trine this moon in Taurus, the full moon. So this is really about, you know, Juno is the marriage asteroid. So it's when I say marriage, though, I would say it's more about devotion. So what we're devoted to, and really, Juno and Virgo is devoted to our own self-actualization process, our own refinement process of that, our own service in the world, our own expression of the divine, of God consciousness or God goddess consciousness, source consciousness, and our own values, and cultivating that in our own garden of consciousness. What it is that we desire to design within our own garden, right? As a contribution and service to the collective and the collective unconscious, knowing that we actually are an important drop in the ocean of consciousness, that we do have ripple effects, and that we actually, of course, whatever we cultivate has a ripple effect in our own life path, our own process. And so this is about what we're devoted to, the values that we're devoted to, and the structure of consciousness that we're devoted to, and how we're actually building our consciousness from the inside out, how we're building our reality from the inside out based on the ideas, perceptions, beliefs that we subscribe to and that we actually act from. And so this is important. What is it that you're devoted to? And what quality of consciousness do you desire to become? Because that is who you naturally are, and it is who you will become as you act on behalf of those ideas and beliefs and values that support that. So I hope this has been helpful. If it has, please do let me know. Like the video, give me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear what you think. I'd love to hear, you know, anything you'd like to share. It always makes the conversation more rich. And if you find this valuable, please do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd love to have you as a subscriber if you feel inclined. If you feel that this would be helpful for someone you know, or people that you know, please do feel free to share the video. And it's always an honor to know that you've watched my video. It's an honor and pleasure to share this information with you. I'm passionate about it. I love it. And it's been such an incredible self-awareness tool and healing tool for me to understand the astrological aspects going on in my life and in the world. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you on the next video.